Hello everyone, my name's Alan Cam. I'm a member of the team that runs NatureSpot. We've got a number of our other team members here. There's Dave Nichols and Graham Kalo is with us this evening. And we've got some of the leading experts from the county. So I wanted to just start for a moment talking about biological recording. So if I could just put up a couple of quick slides. Before we start, just for reference, we have a number of other events coming up in the near future. On Friday afternoon at 3 p.m, we've got Paul Palmer, who's with us this evening, who's just about to identify my moths from this morning, talking about perhaps slightly more difficult moths. So he's going to talk about a moth called the turnip, or the turnip moth, on Friday, and we hope that will be a series of events that we'll be able to run over the next few months. And then on Saturday at 7 p.m, we've got Jeffrey, who's going to talk about ferns for fanatics, and hopefully encourage us to identify ferns and to do some more recording of ferns. Now, I think we've called this an identification clinic, which was just guesswork as to what people actually wanted to do in these sessions. And we would like your feedback on what you value in this session and what is not valuable. I just wanted to say a bit about recording before we go any further. We do encourage you to submit your records. I know from the names I'm seeing on the screen that some of you do already record observations that you make. If those observations are from Leicestershire and Rutland, we would like you to submit them to NatureSpot, www.naturespot.org.uk. If they're from elsewhere in the UK, you can submit them to iRecord, so anywhere else in the UK, to this address here. Then your sightings will be recorded, and for the most part they will be verified by experts. Certainly all the Leicestershire and Rutland ones will, all records that are submitted will be verified, and you'll be informed whether your identification was correct or not. Now, some things are relatively easy and simple and straightforward to identify, and we all like those. Some things are more difficult. So we've developed a number of systems on NatureSpot over the years where we try and help people. And the first is, I think every species now on NatureSpot has got what we call a RAG rating, red, amber, green. Those ratings, so for each species you'll see one of these symbols. The green means that it's easy to identify and you're unlikely to get it wrong. It's not impossible, of course, but you'd have to work very hard to get it wrong. Amber means that you can identify it, but you need to take care. There are similar species. It is possible to make mistakes. And red means that it's not generally possible to identify this casually. The red species means that a photograph alone is generally not sufficient. Now, obviously, it depends what it's a photograph of. That might frequently mean, for example, that you need to examine it under a microscope, or you need to examine part of a flower, or look at the very fine hairs on a leaf. And if you simply point a mobile phone at it and snap a picture, we wouldn't be able to confirm that it was the correct species. Of course, if you send us a photograph that you've taken down the microscope, then that's fine. So it's not necessarily about photos, but it's about generally, it's about the level of detail and how difficult things are to identify. The other thing that we're trying to do is we're trying to give you more and more information. So we've started building these things called identification aids, and these are pop-up. You'll see this blue button, show identification aids. On certain species, we haven't got this for all of the species. We've got nearly 7,000 species listed on NatureSpot at the moment. We haven't got this for all of the species, but where we can, we're adding these in. So this is for a group of flies, and these are not necessarily the easiest creatures to identify. We're trying to build these tables where when you click on the button, you can look at various patterns, features, structures, and this will help you. And we're trying to roll this out across the site. And the bottom panel here is what you see when you submit a biological record. And I think the vast majority of species now have got a box like this. And it will pop up when you select a species, and it will give you advice. And basically, this beetle, Bembidion, is a red species, a red camera species, and so you're going to need a good level of detail, possibly involving a microscope, to convince the verifier that this is the correct species. And we're trying to gradually build more and more of these aids in to the site, to make it easier for people to know what level of detail is required when you submit a record. But with 7,000 species, it's going to take us a while. Okay. Dave or Graham, do you want to add anything to that, or is that comprehensive? Did I use the correct version of the RAG diagram this time?
Yeah, you got that one right.
Good, thank you.
I'd perhaps just also add that we've got additional guidance on how you can get further identification help. On the secondary menu, that's the menu bar that's at the very top of the screen. There's one item called identification and recording. And if you click on that, you'll get a drop-down menu of further pages. And one of those says ID resources for groups. By groups, we mean the different taxon groups, you know, like beetles, moths, and so on. And each of those has got a page, and where we've been able to, we've put books, other internet resources, basically a kind of little mini library of places you can go for additional help in trying to identify whatever it is you're working on.
Great. Okay. Thanks. I've just remembered the tip you gave me about making my pointer larger so that I can, so that people can see it on the screen. I don't know whether anyone has anyone got specimens they would like identified this evening. There's a deafening silence. Okay. In that case, shall I kick off if that's okay? I would like some help, please. And what I would like some help with is some of the moths from my moth trap. Moths have been in pretty short supply up till now this year. The mothing season is just getting going. And when I ran my moth trap overnight last night, I was a lot happier than I have been about what was in there, with one exception, and I'll explain what that is in a minute. I had one of these. This is a poplar hawk moth, a beautiful moth. And fortunately, the other reason I like hawk moths, apart from their beauty, is the fact that they're very easy to identify, which is nice. There were a few other things kicking around in the trap that weren't so easy to identify this morning. And the first one is this one. Now, this is a slightly odd moth because half of it has been erased. The lower half of it has had all the scales rubbed off. I think that may have been my fault. So these are 1 millimeter squares. I think I might have put my thumb on it at some point while I was trying to put it into the trap. So yeah, Graham's got a suggestion.
Yeah, I think that's Syndemis musculana. It's been given a common name now of dark-barred twist.
Dark-barred twist. Ah, okay, right, fine.
But Adrian and Mark will still know it as Syndemis musculana.
Right, okay. That's excellent, because that's kind of what I thought it was. Even though it's only half a moth, It's a new species for me. It's not a species I've had in the garden before, so I'm quite pleased with that. Okay, thank you for that, Graham. Unfortunately, it all goes downhill from here, from my perspective, because the other thing that was noticeable in the trap this morning, apart from quite a lot of, apart from the hawk moth, were quite a lot of pugs. Now, I have to admit, I really struggle with pug moths. Now, I think I know what this one is, but before I make a complete fool of myself, does anyone want to tell me what they think it is? Have you got any volunteers? Paul, what do you think?
Well, I as you know, I would always dissect if I'm not sure. My starting place for the candidate species would be a currant pug, and then if this was in my possession, I would start off by giving it a little whiff of carbon dioxide, and then putting it upside down under the binocular microscope and having a look at its bum to just have a look to see if I could see the shape of the togite plate that sticks out at the bottom, which is, and this species would be a smooth shape rather than anything else. But that would be my starter. But pugs I always sample and dissect.
So I've got I have said moth here. So in a pot, they're all sitting waiting for the advice. So I will be giving it a little whiff of carbon dioxide. Actually, while we're here, I can't remember who it was that gave me this tip now, but it may have been you, Paul. It may have been someone else. Sparklets used to sell one of these a few years back. They don't make them any longer, as far as I know. Therefore, and this is a device that looks like this. You can unscrew it and put a small sparklet CO2 cylinder here, these disposable cylinders. And originally, there was a needle that went in the end. You put it into a bottle of wine, press the button, and it expelled the cork from the bottle of wine. I don't use it for that. I use it for making moths sleepy. If you just give them a little squirt of CO2, it's very economical. It works very well. The moth has a little sleep, and then it wakes up a few minutes later, completely unharmed. It's very good for stilling moths for photography, and it doesn't harm them at all. Am I breaking up at all? I've just had a sign saying my internet connection was poor.
Yes, you were. This is my little device that I use, which is just a CO2 bicycle pump. So the sparklet siphons at the cylinders at the bottom, the CO2 cylinder. And I've just put a bladder needle in, which is a little adapter for blowing things like footballs and beach balls up. And that's a really nice, small, compact tool to use. You forgot to say that the sparklet siphon thing either blew the cork out or blew the bottle up, one of the two.
Well, I'm guessing that's why they stopped making them. I'm guessing exploding wine bottles was the reason they stopped doing it. Yeah, but you can pick them up on eBay. I think I paid $5 for mine. And the cylinders are very cheap, so it's worth having. So you think currant pug? You would look at currant pug. That's a shame, because I was thinking common pug for this one, but you think that's not right?
Well, it's possible, but in the photograph, I can't see. Yeah, the banding is at quite an angle there, but it's the little white spots that are showing. Now, the currant pug would normally only have one of those little tornal spots distinctly showing. This is why it's so difficult from a photograph to get
Yeah.
a really good idea.
Okay. So, well, thanks for that. I have to say that was the easy one. It gets worse from here on in. This is the second one, and I have to say this one I am really struggling with. I don't know if anyone's got any suggestions for this one. Again, the small squares are 1 millimeter, if that helps anyone at all.
Well, I just again, this is really indistinctly marked. I mean, the book that you'd use, or that I refer to as a starting point, is this one. But even so, this is the only marked feature here are the two very slightly elongated stigmata on the forewing. But for me, this would be a definite dissect job, because it may be an unusually pale form, unicolorous form of something common, or it might be something else. I've no idea. Yeah.
Okay. And then, as if that wasn't bad enough, it gets worse. Okay. And then I also have this one. Now, I'm not even going to ask anyone to have a go at this one. I actually think this is probably. I think it's probably the same as the previous one. No,
Alan, I think that's ochreous bug.
Well,
yeah, I would agree with that. If you look at the very elongated stigmata, that's very characteristic. Also, the way it's holding its wings, they're bent a long way back. If that's this is on not this one, the other one that you were
this one,
one. Well, yeah, you see the way it's sat. The wings are held much further back.
Yeah.
And if that's a natural position, I would agree with you. Yeah, Indigata.
Well, I was just about to say precisely that, because I did have one of these a couple of weeks ago, and someone said to me this wing angle is very characteristic ochreous pug. But do you think that's probably a different species to the second one, to this one? I mean, it may not be holding its wings at quite the same angle, because it was a bit groggy at the time. No, you think it's different, Paul?
Yeah, look at the shape of the stigmata, the spots on the wing.
Okay.
They're quite different shape. The wing, the thing that you must always get out of the habit of doing is looking at the colour.
Yeah.
Its size, shape, and then specific patterns like the stigmata on the wings, and then finally look at the colour. And this one, I can see two quite strong elliptical stigmata, and then down in the bottom corner of the wing, I'll call it, at the wing end, the distal end of the wing, there's two very pale spots. You can see a pale spot. It's directly down, about, that's the one. So this may be a unicolorous form of something with much stronger markings, which again is completely different from. Sorry, I'm not. I never use English names of pugs with people because nobody knows them. But again, I mean, this could be a current pug. It could be one of a whole series of pugs with this sort of marking.
I was wondering about friars for this one, actually. Yeah, possibly.
No, definitely not, Alan.
No, not friars. Okay.
Well, Freya's pug is quite a big pug and usually got very strong banding.
Right.
So it's got nothing to suggest it's Freya's pug.
Okay. All right. So we've got a mystery pug. I put the third one in just to make the point that unless you're going to retain specimens for dissection, I don't know if it's my imagination, but it always seems to me that pugs they always seem to get more worn than other species. I don't know if if the scales come off pugs more readily than other species as they age, but I mean, just from a verifier's point of view, if someone had submitted a photograph of this, you know, we wouldn't really have anywhere to go with it. They're all quite difficult from photographs, except maybe the ochreous because of the wing angle. But nevertheless, you know, obviously the condition of the sample is important. We talked a little bit, I think, last time about angles. So if you're photographing a plant, you know, it's helpful if you know the key features of the plant that you're trying to illustrate. If you just take a vertical bird's eye view type shot, it doesn't always make it very easy to identify. So that's my thanks for the suggestions. That's my show and tell. I don't know if anybody else has got any others that they want to have they've found recently.
Can I ask a really fairly basic question?
Please do.
How do you turn the camera around to show something in front of you on Zoom? We don't know that yet.
If you've got a specimen, you can just, you know, you can just hold it up to the camera.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Is that what you meant?
But you also turned you swapped screen round.
I've got some. I took some photographs, and I'm sharing my screen. There's a button called Share Screen.
Okay, share content.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
And then that would go to something.
Are you on an iPad?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Share content.
Okay, might have to play around with that.
If you've got a photograph or a video, you can share it. Those are because I think me me holding the I don't know if you may be able to make out this one.
No.
It's a female. It's a female muslin, but I'm not asking anyone to identify in the pot. This is why I took photographs in advance and then shared the photographs on screen. So, yeah.
Okay, thanks for that.
Okay, you're welcome. Anybody else want to? Any more moths, or shall we move on from moths and do a different taxon? Okay. Let me just do one more before I shut up, because I don't want this to be all me. This is a record that came in very recently. I think Sue might be familiar with this one. This is yellow nonia, or yellow monkswort. We've only had a couple of records of this. We don't see this very often. But I understand it's probably a cultivated plant that's likely to be an escape. This wasn't in a garden, but I don't know if anybody wants to comment on that, Sue or Jeffrey or anybody. Want to say anything about yellow monkswort?
I've actually never seen it, Alan, so I just had to Google the images really to determine it, but it does seem quite distinctive. I don't know if it's an escape from cultivation. It doesn't look very ornamental to me, but I don't know whether Jeffrey knows.
Well, I've seen it a couple of times. In fact, I saw it 2 weeks ago on a bit of land in Evington. The waterwork company had been digging a big trench there, and they'd fill it all in a few weeks later. And of course, all sorts of things come up again now, including this Nonia lutea. It is spreading quite a lot in the south of England, and it's quite difficult to get rid of. I think it's a bit invasive, but it's not well known here yet. But it's one to look out for, and it's one which I think we'll see a little bit more of later. Is it
a native, Jeffrey?
No, it's not. I think it's from,
okay.
I think it's from North America actually, but it does seem to produce lots of seed, and it does spread very well.
Well, that
according to Stace.
So, say again, Sue?
It's from Russia, according to Stace.
Oh, they're the same nowadays, aren't they?
Yeah, America. Yeah.
It's a very bristly plant, Alan.
Yeah, Graham, you've recorded this one, haven't you?
Yeah, there's a lot of it grows at Broughton Astley, but not far from habitation. But once it gets hold, it took over the whole of the grass verge, and it's very bristly and rough. You'll know it by the feel, really. It's quite unusual.
Okay, lovely, thanks. I was going to ask Jeffrey, actually, if you don't mind. You've been on your daily exercise. You've been turning up some botanical interest.
Yeah. Well, normally in weather like this, I wouldn't be wandering around the suburbs. I'd be out in the countryside, probably with Helen and Steve, going for tea somewhere. But during lockdown, of course, I don't go very far, so I decided to re-record my home tetrad in monads. And there's quite a lot to find because there's over 300 taxa have been recorded in the past. There's quite a lot to re-find. And it's been quite interesting going along, particularly the streets and pavements, and seeing what there is. I've also been going down streets that I wouldn't normally go down. So it's been quite useful for me finding out where to go and how to get to places. But just at the end of my house, on the other side of London Road, I saw a green patch of what was a cerastium. Now, you expect to find a couple of sorts of cerastium inland. The commonest one is Cerastium glomeratum, the sticky mouse ear, and that has quite ovate leaves. They're very yellow-green, they're quite pale, and it produces quite a big erect head of flowers. But this wasn't like that at all. This was quite mid to dark green, and it was close to the ground. And I thought, well, that's a bit interesting. So I picked it up and took it home and keyed it out to the Cerastium diffusum, which is sea mouse ear. And it is common. It hasn't, not common. It has been found fairly often, fairly frequently inland, but always in these sites where there's a bit of winter salting. So again, it's a coastal plant that's moving in. I think the last record in Leicestershire was about 1997, so it hasn't been seen for a while. But it's not a plant that most people are going to go out and look for. The thing that, the reason that it did strike me as unusual is, I say, because the leaves were quite dark green. I mean, sorry, mid to dark green, and it was prostrate. Now, the only other one that looks like that is Cerastium fontanum, which is the common mouse ear. But that's a plant of grasslands. You don't find it on the sides of roads. So that was quite an interesting find. And obviously I was going around finding the very common plants you normally find, like Sagina procumbens, procumbent pearlwort. And also now you can start to see Sagina filicornis, which is upright pearlwort, which is starting to appear. And they're differentiating quite nicely now, because the procumbent one does spread all the way across the cracks of the pavement, and the other one now starts to put up a lot of flower spikes which come up and become very erect. So I was looking at all these things and recording them, and I got to Crown Hills College, which had some quite interesting verges there. And I turned into a suburban road to carry on doing some more weed recording. And I saw really quite an interesting pile of cigarette butts on the pavement. And I think because I was so annoyed with the fact that people had thrown all their cigarette butts into the street, I actually stopped and looked. And when I looked more carefully, I thought, well, that's something I don't recognise. And I looked at it and I thought, well, actually, I do recognise that. I've only seen it once before, but that was in the south of France. And it's a plant that is native to Britain as well, but it usually only lives in commonly Jersey, Guernsey, and the southwest, because the South Cornwall coast and the Devon coast. And it's called four-leaved allseed, Polycarpum tetraphyllum. And it is known inland and has been recorded quite a few times in the recent years. Some of the plants are sort of moving up from the south to the north. And 2 or 3 records in Northamptonshire and 3 or 4 in Warwickshire. So it's more a case of, when are we going to get it? Well, this was the year we got it. And it occurred in, in a place I would probably never have normally looked if we hadn't had lockdown. So there are some advantages to lockdown. That was a couple of good finds. That was the first county record.
I think I think the verges by Crown Hills College were planted as part of the Bug Life beeline scheme, because last year there was masses and masses of Viper's burgloss up there, and various other things. So I think they must have sowed some sort of mix. So whether it came out of a mix or not, I don't know.
This is on the south side of the college, towards Evington. I did have a look at those verges as well, and there's a few things have actually persisted. The yellow rattle they put in has persisted, and so has the corn cockle, which is coming along quite nicely. There's a few other things there as well. In fact, that area turned out to be quite unusually odd, because if you go across the road to the Goals Football Academy and have a look in the car park, there's a huge bed of greater pond sedge on the edge of the car park, and I have no idea why it's there. It's not wet enough, it's not damp enough. Maybe it was in the past, but it's just a big sedge bed on the side of the car park. You know,
Graham,
how these things get there sometimes, don't you? But I think the polycarpon was actually it's on the south side of the college, about 3 or 4 streets in, near the Mayflower Church, well, a bit further on from the Mayflower Church. So I think I don't know where that came from. Maybe it came from people who commute to Northampton and picked it up there, or maybe they'd had a holiday in Cornwall and come back and emptied their bucket and spade out and come out with it.
Graham, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I've also been doing my local tetrad in Sapcote. One of the ones I found is New Zealand bittercress. I think this is probably an introduction from nurseries originally, but it's very obvious, very distinct from the other bittercresses, and it's very low growing, only to a couple of centimetres generally, and very big flowered compared with bittercresses. So that's one to look for. And the other one that I found and was interesting is fern grass. Both can be seen now, so worth looking out for.
It is worth looking at the fern grasses carefully. If the inflorescence branches at the bottom, it's it's a plant called Catapodium rigidum. But if you've got much shorter, non-branching flowers on the non-branching florets on the axis, then you might have got Catapodium marinum. We've had that 2 or 3 times now. Mainly on the edges of sorted roads. It's one of the more the coastal plants that's coming in. And they do form quite a good community. In fact, one plant which is narrow-leaved, Lepidium ruderale, narrow-leaved pepperwort, which I find nearly always on salted edges of roads now and salted pavements. It seems to be very concentrated there now.
I have to say that the Danish scurvy grass on Welford Road was spectacular this year. It formed a complete carpet, along the verge. Sue, you wanted to say something?
Yes, as everyone is saying what the exciting things they found lately, I haven't found anything exciting, but I did find prickly poppy the weekend, which is very pretty, with a really fantastic flower. And I don't think it turns up very often, but again, it might be one of these that comes in with some material brought in, or perhaps even, dare I say it, some fly tipping, which we're seeing so much of around. It's always worth looking in gateways and sort of slightly scuffy places for these unusual annuals. And some of them are really very lovely as well. I don't know whether I can share a photo of it. I really don't know how to. I won't even attempt to. I need more tuition in how to use this.
It is a lovely plant, I'll agree with that. It's really nice.
I'm going to go up to Evington and look for the corncockle. That's for sure. I can't miss that one out. That's my walk tomorrow. Paul, sorry, Elspeth, you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say we have lots of corncockle on our allotment.
Oh wow!
Which we have. It's so beautiful that we've decided to bring quite a lot of it into our garden, and our neighbour likes it, so he's got some as well. So we're doing quite well on corncockle, and it's a very attractive plant. Really like it.
I might try and get some seed, collect some seed then later. So I've got one eye on the clock, and thinking about moving on and not taking too long. Paul wanted to share something.
And
well,
Russell.
I think we're jumping taxons again, probably. But what have you got, Paul?
Okay, it was actually a plant, but I will just jump back. When you said about it being a bad year for moths, I'm up to 62 species of Lepidoptera this year, and not many of those are butterflies. So they are about. Now, one of my party pieces when I do walks is spotting orchids. And when Leslie and I first got together, I said, "Oh, you've got orchids on your lawn," which you didn't believe me. So we put some little stakes down, and sure enough, bee orchids popped up. Well, on our morning walk, I noticed the council hadn't mowed a patch of grass, and there was a short bit. So there was obviously builder's rubble underneath it. So I had a little look, and sure enough, there are a couple of rosettes of orchid leaves. So just try and share that now. Can you see those rosettes now? I'm not sure what it is, so maybe Sue or somebody else can help me. Because of the time of year, we've gone past probably green-winged orchids, which is the usual early one. So I was heading more over, because we're here in Leicestershire, to bee orchid. But I'm watching every day, waiting to see the flower spike come up. So if somebody can tell me what it is, that would be brilliant.
I think it's bee orchid, but I mean, Jeffrey, what do you reckon?
I agree.
It's a bit battered, Paul. Have you trodden on it?
No. The council ran the mower over it, and I think the reason why the rosettes have survived just here, because of the rubble, there's some little dips in the ground, so the mower just ran over the top, and the growing point, was obviously left. So it's nothing to do with me. I've pointed it out to another couple on the ground if other people know about it. But anyway, they're probably all over the show. But anyway, it was just something different to the moths, and yeah, just rather nice to spot. So I'll keep an eye out in the autumn as well. So down south, I was always finding autumn ladies' dresses in people's lawns. I don't know if they're that common up here.
For those of you who are on Twitter, we've had pictures of the Leicestershire lizard orchid shared again. Apparently we've got two now. So I don't know if they're heading in the right direction. I don't know if they're heading into the county boundary or away from the county boundary, because it is really touch and go whether they're Leicestershire orchids or not. But the mother plant seems to be doing quite well, judging by the photos, and now has a cage around it, which hopefully would stop the council mowing it off. No guarantees, obviously, but whether it attracts attention and whether it's necessarily a good thing to cage it on a verge like that, I don't know. And there is a small one, so it does seem to have seeded from previous years. So we might. I don't think we'll see flower from the small one this year, but it looks like there will be another lizard orchid. Sue?
Yeah. Yeah, if I can just put the county council hat on for a second. If you do let the highways maintenance people know if you've got an unusual plant on the verge, they will do their best to avoid it. They have got systems in place to inform, the guys out there. It doesn't always work because sometimes people don't quite know where things are, but they're really very well aware of the lizard orchid, which, as you probably know, is also especially protected by law. It is a nationally rare plant. And yes, it is. There are two spikes this year. There's also bee orchids up there and greater butterfly orchids. So it's a little hotspot completely mysteriously. No one really knows why.
Lucy, I don't know if you want to say anything about at the moment. Lucy's going to be doing a talk, Zoom talk for us next month. We seem to have got onto the topic of road verges, Lucy. Do you want to say anything?
Yeah, well, just to explain, my role at the County Council is to work on partnership projects to try and improve the biodiversity of the County Council's land holdings, but also any interests and partnerships that we may have where we have an influence. And I think Sue touched on it just with regard to verges. I think the Council has been working for quite some time now on trying to avoid spots, but what we're trying to do at the county, and this is what I wanted to talk about at the next meeting, was taking a bit more of a strategic approach, really. I say strategic approach, so instead of just waiting for people to ring up to say, oh, this patch of verge here has got something interesting on it, that we try and look after as many verges as we can better than we are at the moment, so we can improve the biodiversity and the management of the sites for the longer term, because I think it's sort of widely acknowledged that we don't necessarily manage the verges in a way that could, apart from not mowing things over, that could improve the value of what's in there diversity-wise. So we're doing some trials at the moment. One is an urban trial, which is really about changing the hearts and minds, I think, of the public, and the other one is a rural trial, which is more about how we can more widely manage verges. So I suppose that's where I'm coming from at the moment. Is it's an interesting topic in terms of natural capital, how verges contribute to carbon sequestration. What's the ecosystem service from biodiversity in these contexts? And because we've got a climate emergency, it is a hot topic that needs to to be raised and brought to the forefront in discussion. So yeah, so the next meeting really is to talk more about what we're trying to do there on a broader scale to change perception. I mean, Sue's worked for the County Council a lot longer than I have. I started the County Council in May last year, and have sort of been a bit of an active observer for the last 6 or 7 months, well, more than that, nearly 12 months now. And I think Sue would sort of acknowledge that there is probably a need to change perceptions out there. So we're already interested in NatureSpot, the people that have come tonight to talk about species that we have identified and have learned about over the years. But what we need to do is change the understanding of people who don't know very much about biodiversity or species, and to get them to be voices to help us protect it. And I think that's quite critical at the moment. I think probably the discussion about bowling green verges has been going on for quite some time, and yeah. But we do really need to do something about it. It's only one habitat in many, but it's a step, isn't it, in the right direction?
I'm always very. This is probably not your department, but I'm always very envious of Rutland's road verges. They do have some nice road verges in Rutland. So I've shared the link in the chat window. If you've got the chat window open, Lucy's going to be talking on the 15th of June. So yeah. You can sign up for that now if you want to, but we'll be advertising that nearer the time as well. Is anyone else? I'm acutely aware that the time is going on, and some people have got pub quizzes to go to. Is there online pub quizzes? Obviously. Is there anything else that anyone wanted to share or talk about this evening? Dave or Graham or anyone?
Russell's trying to say something.
Right. Can you hear me? Good. Just a quick word about agrostemma and allotments. You do know the seeds are very poisonous.
Yes. Thank you.
Sorry, unmuted. Okay. Is there anyone else wanted to share anything? Well, in that case, what I'd like to do is just thank you all very much for this, and thanks very much.